Humanitarian organizations in Sudan say the situation in the city of Al Fasher in Sudan's North Darfur remains dire. It is reported that at least 600,000 people, almost half of them children, have been displaced from Al Fasher. Close to 300,000 are still trapped, cut from aid and food. And this morning we discuss further the developments coming from Sudan as the humanitarian situation worsens amid the ongoing war. And we speak to also this morning we wake up to the news that a landslide has killed at least 1,000 people in the remote Mara Mountains in western Sudan. So we speak to Dr. Charles Nyuykonge, who is Africa Peace and Conflict Analyst on this. Dr. Nyuykonge, thank you for making time for us. How are you this morning?
Thank you so much, Asanda. I'm doing well, and good morning to your listeners.
Let's start with you painting a picture for us of the exact situation in the city of Al Fasher. How dire is it?
The city of Al Fasher is dire, and the landslide which has just occurred in the Tarasin village, or particularly around the Mara Mountain, it's not just a natural disaster. It's a disaster which only comes to amplify the catastrophic impact of the Sudan's war, which largely leaves the country reeling from some of the pre-existing challenges, whether it is the drop in the potential for human survival in the country, where individuals live on an average of $750, which is about $15,000 per annum. You have about 12 million internally displaced. About 180,000 people have died so far since 2023 because of the conflict, and you have about 4 million further refugees. So the landslide makes the situation not just worse in Al Fasher, but in Darasin village.
Which groups are mostly affected by all of this, not just the landslide, but the entire war in Sudan?
The entire war in Sudan is actually a proxy war, which is fought internally by both state and non-state actors. And if I may, I would say the internal actors largely are the Sudanese army that is supported on the one hand by the Sudanese Liberation Force. Then you have the Janjaweed and the RSF on the other hand. Then you have powers that have aligned themselves. The Sudanese army supported by Egypt, Turkey, Iran, and Qatar. And General Dagalo of the RSF is supported by UAE and Libya to some extent. So to the extent that it is so, Sudan is really in a very messy security landscape at the moment, which the landslide only worsens the situation.
We also know of a drone strike by the Sudanese army on a medical clinic in South Darfur, which left 12 people killed on Saturday. How much of an effect will this have on what's happening in the north side of the country?
In the north side of the country, it will have two different types of effects. On the one hand, we have to look at the human and the economic impact of that, is that it deepens the pre-existent emergency. It worsens access to already areas where it is not easy to reach. It increases psychosocial support because now the trauma from those who felt that they were safe in certain areas, they realize that the safety is just illusory. And on the other hand, it places pressure on local resilience. And if we have to look at the other hand, where maybe we have to reflect on the peace, security challenges, or the impact on peace and security, it becomes a further distraction from the conflict resolution efforts by those who are involved in that. And then the humanitarian aid and the battlefield has now widened again, further displacing more people than I have just mentioned, and this undermines peace efforts.
In terms of the ordinary Sudanese and what they're saying, have you had a chance to go through these stories that they're telling and just find out from them in terms of how they're struggling and the examples they give of their realities?
The examples the Sudanese give of their realities is that the external community speaks about them, but that they are actually the ones who are living the situation, and that the situation is perhaps dire than we actually think. Some Sudanese, especially the civil society organizations, they believe that the situation in the country is largely because Omar al-Bashir is still at large and that he's living within the country and controlling things to the point of causing instability in the country, and that if he was not in the country, perhaps the country would have come together to stabilize. Others think that the country has only destabilized because Omar al-Bashir was actually overthrown, and that him being there, he was holding the country together. To the extent that all of this is so, the Sudanese need some kind of national dialogue.
Figures on Fasher have put those killed there at least 19 people. Do we know if this number could rise, and how many are injured?
Yes, definitely the number could rise, and if we have to even shift just slightly beyond Fasher, and we look at just the victims of the landslide which you mentioned earlier on. The landslide has claimed about 1,000 lives, and I think that report suggests that there's only one survivor. And the call for humanitarian assistance to come in is further impeded by the fact that the area is inaccessible.
Do we know who is behind the bombings that have taken place in the country lately? Observers have said that the rapid support forces have stepped up their assaults in recent weeks.
Yes, after the rapid support forces lost control of Khartoum in March of this year, they have stepped up their assault in the east of the country, where Al Burhan, the current interim leader, has established the headquarters of the country, or the headquarters of his leadership. So they've stepped up attacks, drone attacks in particular, in the east part of the country. And Al Burhan has actually said these drone attacks will not be possible without the support of the UAE.
The paramilitary Rapid Support Forces, or RSF commander Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, was sworn in on Sunday as the head of a parallel government in Sudan. What do you make of this?
This only complicates the social cohesion project of Sudan, that after the split of Sudan, we thought Northern Sudan would be together, and now the swelling in of Dagalo only creates a situation where one starts wondering whether the solution of the Sudan is to further split Sudan. To the extent that is so, and whether this is going to stand the test of time, is a matter to be seen.
What of the cholera outbreak in the country? The first case on that was detected in June this year, with 20 deaths reported. What is being done on this front, and how much of an impact is this having?
Already, the medical facilities in the country are overstretched. The humanitarian assistance which the country direly needs cannot access certain regions of the country. The earthquakes or the natural disasters that the country is experiencing only go to worsen the situation, because now there's not just a shortage of food, there's also a shortage of water. So whatever people can find anywhere as a form of liquid, they want to consume. And this only goes to deepen the impact of the cholera, and the risk is that this could spread to other parts of the country. So the country is really in dire need of humanitarian support from anywhere. And I dare say, South Africa has accompanied this country for so long, but now South Africa seems silent.
Mm. The United Nations, they've said they haven't been silent on this. They've said Al Fasher is experiencing acute malnutrition among children there. What will it take to unblock aid delivery for the region and for the necessary nutrition services to reach people?
The country needs sustained ceasefire agreement, and the country needs an end to the war. I think an end to the war, and a situation which perhaps we cannot envisage now, where Al Burhan and Delgado can work together, would be really good for the country, and with them cooperating to give humanitarian access to the communities which are most in need of it, would be a good way for the country to keep conflict behind and to start uniting to rebuild its infrastructure.
UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has called for a ceasefire in the city. He called for that on Friday. Is this call likely to have any impact, and in what ways would it, if it did?
To the extent that the call for ceasefire is done remotely and that conversations are not had with the exact protagonist or efforts to bring the protagonist to the table have been stalled, this call is largely going to fall on deaf ear because at the moment, the different protagonists are busy consolidating power so that they can maintain their wealth, control their autonomy, and protect their lives.
What about shelters in the country? How are they managing, and what type of support are they able to give at this stage?
The shelters are largely self-sustained, and the people largely move to the areas where they think that they can be safe. Like I mentioned earlier, the Tarasan village where the earthquake has occurred has been largely under the control of the Sudanese Liberation Army, and this control was seen by many Sudanese as a safe area. Now that the earthquake has happened, it just creates a lot more chaos in the country. So it's hard to imagine that anywhere in Sudan at the moment is safe or that humanitarian access can even reach the country. Perhaps if the ceasefire happened, humanitarian access could get into the country or to hard to reach regions through the air.
So, even at that stage, then, when humanitarian access reaches the country, the fact that it's been blocked is a violation of human rights, of children's rights. So, what do you foresee then as being the consequence for those responsible for blocking aid after the fact?
I think that those who are blocking the aid are fully aware of the fact that their war strategy goes against the Geneva Convention. I think that they are aware of the fact that talks of genocide are real. I think they are aware of the fact that they are violating human rights law. And so the list of those who could be enlisted for international warrants would only grow.
We know with conflict there are things like violence and rape reported. What is the situation on that front looking like at the moment in Sudan?
The situation has largely gone unabated. And at the moment, the approaches for the tools for conflict resolution that have been tested seem to be largely ineffective. I note, and I've mentioned this before, that the African Union has actually been largely out of breath, in part because the belligerents themselves have not invited the African Union to be a part of this. They rather prefer to go to the east, to the Middle East, to get their conflict resolved. And to the extent that is so, I believe that some kind of involvement by the region, whether by IGAD or by the African Union, could bring new breath to the conflict situation in the country.
We've touched on health and the situation on that front and how it's been affected, but what about education? We know reports of education facilities also having been under attack. What do things look like on that?
As far as education is concerned, people are managing to homeschool, and only in areas that have largely not been touched. That especially in the Tarasan village, where some people who had run there for refuge could actually effectively go to school. But to the extent that the Tarasan village has been touched, Fasher is in itself in shambles, that it is hard to imagine what future the children of Sudan would have.
Doctor, thank you so much for giving us an update on the story. Of course, it's one that we'll continue to monitor. Things are dire. I don't even know, where to from here in terms of the hope. But I guess we hold on to some type of hope that at least aid will be allowed into the areas where it's mostly needed, especially being children who are really, really affected in a negative impact. Dr. Nyuykonge, thank you again for your time.
Thank you so much, Asante, for having me.
That's Dr. Charles Nyuykonge, Africa Peace and Conflict Analyst, talking to us about the situation and the latest there in Sudan's North Darfur, the city of Fasher. Situation remaining dire as far as humanitarian aid is concerned, and then exacerbating that, a landslide which has been recently reported there, which has killed at least 1,000 people in the remote Mara Mountains, and that's in the western part of Sudan. All areas of Sudan being affected by this ongoing war.
Africa in Song.